the policy revisions related to project delays and those policy gaps. And then finally, we will hear announcements related to the TERG, which is our Technical Evaluation Reference Group, and Vlad is here with us, and we'll also hear some of those updates from our colleague Saliha. And we want also to engage in an open dialogue and discussion. So after each presentation, perhaps we will give a few minutes for question and answer. Next slide, please, Sophie. And related to that, just maybe a few housekeeping rules on how that will work. So just to let everybody know that we will be recording this webinar, and we will make the recording available, I guess, on our website. And if not, we will share a link where you can access the recording. And I would like to ask all of us present to please mute our microphones if you are not speaking. And if you want to keep your video on so that we can see you, please go ahead and do that. That would be nice to see your face and being able to identify who's speaking. If you want to take the floor when we do the Q&A, you can either raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and then you will need to unmute yourself to take the floor. Alternatively, in case you want to quickly capture your question while the presenter is speaking, please type in your question in the chat box, and you can type it in either English, French, or Spanish, and we will be happy to respond to those chats as we go. We will type in the responses to that so that everybody can see the response, both the question and the response to that. So as a last word, we also have interpretation services available. We have interpretation in French and Spanish. So when you do take the floor, please feel free to speak in either English, French, or Spanish. And you can click on the language of choice, and you will be able to get the interpretation as we go. So without further ado, let me invite my colleague Saliha, and Saliha is going to give the overview of how the board meeting went and probably give an overview of the discussions from the board. So with that, Saliha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Farai. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all present. I will go over some of the general outcomes, generally speaking, outcomes of the 42nd meeting of the Adaptation Fund Board. And this is just to give you a sense of some of the important decisions that were taken during that time. It is not going to cover all the decisions. It is not going to go into the details of each decision, but I will attempt to provide you with a summary of decisions that are of most direct relevance to the implementing entities as we think it is. Next slide, please. So the last meeting took place between April 16th and 19th in Bonn and Germany, as these board meetings usually do. The Project and Program Review Committee, or PPRC, met the first days of the board meeting, and so did the Ethics and Finance Committee, or EFC. The board itself covered 19 agenda items. And of course, PPRC and EFC had their own agendas, which were also quite heavy. And in total, over 100 documents were prepared for the board. And so this resulted in 60 decisions, of which 27 were project funding decisions or project related to individual projects. Some were approvals, some were endorsements. And out of these, the funding decisions of the project decisions, the funding decisions resulted in $82.2 million US committed for projects that were approved or PFGs that were approved in conjunction with projects that were concepts that were endorsed. Next slide, please. Now, like I mentioned, I will not go in depth into all the decisions that were taken care. We don't have time for that. However, if you're interested to go in greater depth, you may find the decision document on the AFB 42 meeting page. The link is there. It's easy to find, and the document is named Decisions of the AFB 42 meeting. Right below one of the key decisions for implementing entities, of course, is the amount of funding that is going to be available going forward. As you may know, each year the board decides on funding provisions for certain windows. Those include the regional programming window, what the enhanced direct access provision, which is now renamed locally led adaptation. More on that later. On innovation programming, on small grants, funding provisions. And there is also another one in this particular decision. But quickly, the board has decided to approve $60 million for regional project and program proposals, which includes also the PFG requests. It has decided to approve $26.5 million for funding locally led adaptation single country projects and programs, including the PFG, and $35 million for funding a new global aggregator program for channeling grants for LLA, locally led adaptation, to non-accredited entities. More on that later in this webinar. The board has decided to approve $30.3 million for funding large innovation projects and programs, including PFGs, and $1.5 million for small innovation grants, $1.5 million for learning grants, and $1 million for scale-up grants. And so these are the funding provisions that are available for programming in the coming fiscal year, which, just to remind you, starts in July of 2024 and ends with the end of June 2025. At the meeting next spring 2025, the board will consider and approve, presumably, funding provisions for the following year. Next slide, please. There were substantial decisions taken on a learning grant amount increase, on additional delivery modalities for expanding support for LLA, and on modifications of project formulation grants. And as you know, we will discuss these later on. There were also decisions taken on broadening the scope, eligibility criteria, and type of technical assistance grants available to national and regional implementing entities. Just to put it on your radar, the board has decided to ask the Secretariat to submit a paper to the PPRC at the 35th meeting. So that's AFB 44. It's a year from now, outlining an enhanced readiness program. And the enhanced readiness program should, among other things, focus on demand-driven support, expand in scope and in recipients, deliver tailored support, and strengthen readiness partnerships and collaboration. The paper should also include an analysis on the possibility of broadening the scope, eligibility criteria, and type of technical assistance grants and their availability to national and regional implementing entities. Next slide. A decision was So the board decided to approve the administrative budgets of the board, the secretariat, Adaptation Fund Technical Evaluation Reference Group and its secretariat, and the trustee for the Adaptation Fund for fiscal year 2025. A decision was taken regarding observations on post-approval requests for changes received by the secretariat by the Technical Evaluation Reference Group of the Adaptation Fund, basically a gap analysis of the current policies pertaining to project post-approval requests for changes. We will discuss more of that later. There is a decision regarding the analysis of the provisions of the operational policies and guidelines for parties to access resources from the AF related to designated authorities of the fund. And so the Secretariat has been requested to propose options for amending provisions related to the DAs and to present an analysis of their operational implications. And this will entail a consultative process, comparative approach. Next slide, please. Now, there was a decision, B4253, which essentially, I will read the full decision. The Adaptation Fund Board decided with respect to the issue of policy compliance under Section 302 of the Adaptation Fund Standard Project Legal Agreement to pursue the option of allowing implementing entities to apply their own policies and procedures, which should enable them to comply with the fund's standards, policies, and procedures. So with respect to the issue of the auditing requirement under Section 701 of the legal agreement to pursue the option of allowing all multilateral implementing entities to submit certified financial statements as part of the annual performance report and after project closure. And then the Secretariat has been requested to, with regard to the issue of auditing requirements, to further consider options for additional measures to mitigate fiduciary risks, to prepare a draft of amendments to the legal agreements to reflect paragraphs A and B above, and to submit the outcomes of the work related to subparagraph C, Roman 1 and C Roman 2 to the board for consideration at its 43rd meeting, and to communicate present decision to the implementing entities, which I have just done. And this is, as you know, a major change. There was a decision, you can go forward. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. No, back. Thank you. The fund also decided to establish the status of active civil society observer of the Adaptation Fund. That means that now the civil society will be entitled to participate in the proceedings of the open segments and to make interventions, of course, upon the invitation of the chair of the board, as usual. There was a decision to update the ESB of the Adaptation Fund, taking a fit-for-purpose approach. It was outlined in as option 1 in document AFB B4211, and a decision to develop options for a policy on safeguarding against sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment to be presented at the upcoming board meeting as well. Next slide, please. A decision on resource mobilization requests the Secretariat to prepare an analysis of the usage of the various caps and to develop options for adjusting project and programming related caps, including the cap for MIEs, and to present them to the board for consideration at the next board meeting. So stay posted for those developments coming in October. The next board meeting will take place from October 8th to 11th, again in Bonn, Germany this year. And there was a decision about the subsequent board meeting, which, as you can see, will be taking place March 18th to 21st, 2025 in Bonn, Germany. This concludes the overview of the key decisions taken at the last board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salia, for that overview. Are there any questions regarding the overview that Saliha has provided, bearing in mind that other aspects that she has touched on related to things like the learning grants and the locally led adaptation funding window? We have speakers who are going to get into a little bit more detail on those. So maybe I would refrain from asking on those two particular elements, but on everything else that she has touched upon. Any question? I am not seeing any raised hands so far, or any chat for that matter. Okay, so if you happen to think of a question or comment, please put it in the chat, and we will be happy to get into that discussion in detail. So thanks, Talia, for the presentation once again. We will now move on to the next presentation, and this is going to discuss the locally led adaptation funding window and the decision related to that. So my colleague Alisa is going to get into that detail. So Alisa, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Farai, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. To give you a very brief background of where this is coming from, in January of 2021, the Global Commission of Adaptation launched the principles of locally led adaptation. And the Adaptation Fund actively contributed to the development of the LLA principles and as well as endorsed them. There are 8 principles, and I will not get into the details of those principles, but just to briefly mention that the principles aim at devolving decision-making to the lowest appropriate level, and among other key elements. As you are aware that the fund, in addition to direct access, pioneered the enhanced direct access window. And this window and those that have already accessed these grants are well aware that it aims at empowering local communities in taking decisions on the programming of climate funds. And it has a key element of allocating funds to the national and subnational levels, including screening, the review and selection of projects at the local levels. So this window or this funding opportunity directly related to the principle 1 of the LLA, that is devolving decision making to the lowest level. That being said, the fund has accumulated some lessons from the enhanced direct access window, and some of the insights received, including from national implementing entities, was the need for dedicated capacity building and technical assistance, so to enable local actors to meaningfully contribute to the identification, design, monitoring, and implementation of these locally led grants. In addition to that, to mention that the fund has over the past few years, implementing a very successful global aggregator, which is the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator. And this accelerator presents an interesting opportunity of devolving financing directly to those actors that are not accredited with the Adaptation Fund. So also one of the lessons that came out from AFCIA was again the need for technical assistance to be provided along with the small grants as an essential element to successfully lead to the realization of locally led adaptation grants. And these technical assistance would help in the preparation, business plans, implementation plans, trainings, and other tools that would really empower local communities and organizations to implement LLA grants. Keeping that in mind, along with a series of consultations conducted by the Secretariat on the sidelines of COP28, along with a survey that was circulated widely, there were a number of other learnings and recommendations that came out from these consultations. And these consultations were conducted with indigenous groups, with women's groups, youth groups, local governments, government representatives, as well as UNFCCC parties and implementing entities. So keeping all of that background in mind, the new delivery model builds on some of the lessons and the learning from the Enhanced Direct Access window, but further expands it and enhances it. So the three elements under this locally led facility are, for example, the first one being that the Enhanced Direct Access window will now be called a single country LLA program, project and program window. And so what this means is that it will merge the Enhanced Direct Access window into an expanded and enhanced window for single country locally led projects. Unlike previously, where the EDA grants were only accessible to NIEs, this is now accessible also to multilateral and regional implementing entities. And the current grant size is at 5 million per project or program. So initially, EDA was only 5 million per country, but now it has been changed to 5 million per project and program. In addition to that, a key element and based on the recommendations for enhanced technical assistance is the project formulation support. So for the LLA single country projects, the maximum amount that can be requested for a PFG is 150,000. I won't get into the details of this because we will have a presentation from Saliha on the PFGs. But just to mention, because of the enhanced capacity needs, in addition to the 150 that would be available for these LLA type of projects, an additional amount of 100,000 can be accessed, and this would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis with the provided justifications. And so, in addition, in order to enable local actors to design projects from the start, this LLA window can be accessed by a three-step process. For example, a country can submit a pre-concept. Once that is endorsed, a concept proposal, and once that is endorsed, a full developed proposal. And this is encouraged. Just to mention also, the PFG at the pre-concept stage would be at 20% of the maximum total that can be accessed for this specific window. Saliha already mentioned the annual provision of funding that would be available and set aside by the board for this LLA window. In addition, the Secretariat has adjusted the proposal templates, and this can be found in an addendum to the document that was presented to the board. It's an Annex 3 of this document. There is a link that will be provided as part of this presentation, so you can access the document directly, but also the Secretariat will post the relevant templates on the website. So that covers the first element on the single country LLA projects. Now moving on to the global aggregator for LLA. The global aggregator was identified as part of the implementation plan of the MTS. And I hope there's no interruptions in what you can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Elisa. Please
Okay,
go
great.
ahead.
Okay, great. So the global aggregator, as I mentioned, was identified under the implementation plan, and it is meant as a vehicle that would operate at the global scale. And this relates to enabling those actors that are not accredited with the Adaptation Fund to access funding directly from MIEs and RIEs. Sorry, Farai, I'm getting a message from a colleague saying that you can't hear me. Can you please confirm that you can hear me?
Alisa, from our end, we can hear you just fine. And I
Okay,
have
thank
not
you.
seen any other participants say they cannot hear you.
Okay,
Please go ahead.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about the interruptions, and thank you very much also to those mentioning that they can hear me. Okay, so continue, and sorry about that break. This global aggregator, and Saliha already mentioned that there is a set aside amount of 35 million. This can be accessed by multilateral and regional implementing entities. So the MIEs and RIEs that would access these grants would then function at a global scale, providing these locally led adaptation grants directly to those actors that may be youth entrepreneurs, it may be SMEs, it may be farmers associations, and a whole range of actors that cannot access funds directly from the Adaptation Fund. And a key element for the global aggregator is to provide technical assistance to building capacities at the local level to enable the local identification, design, and implementation of these small grants. Tentatively, 2 rounds of requests for proposals are planned, and these are between 2024 and 2027. And the call for expressions of interest, which the Secretariat will publish very soon in the coming weeks, would be sent out again to the multilateral and regional implementing entities. And there are a range of different criteria that could be considered under these calls for expressions of interest. To mention a few, these would include alignment with the vision and principles of LLA, supporting the implementation on the global goal of adaptation, granting mechanisms and proposing review processes with specificity for innovative options for facilitating the submission of proposals from local actors. Then the administration cost and management fee allocations, including budget breakdowns that would ensure adequate arrangements for the monitoring and evaluation of locally led grants. Another key element of the global aggregator, including the LLA facility at large, is the importance of coordinating learning and knowledge management. And so these windows should speak to each other to enhance then not just the knowledge about how to deliver locally led finance, but also what works and what doesn't work, and what are some of the challenges that could be enhanced for this program. Moving on. So in addition to the global aggregator, there is also the provision to establish regional LLA type of window. These regional projects would be open to multilateral and regional implementing entities,
You have
and they
5
would
minutes,
involve
Alisa. Sorry.
and they would involve up to three countries to access these grants. And the Secretariat proposes that this regional window would be developed for the board meeting at the 44th meeting. So that would be next year in March. So in the spring of next year. So the work will be underway until this regional window can be defined. Could you please move on to the next slide? So here are some key links that would be relevant to you. As I mentioned that there are some criteria for the expressions of interest for the LLA aggregator. There is a link, and the paragraphs and relevant information are mentioned on the criteria. Again, I also mentioned about the single country LLA projects and the fact that there is a new template that is in the annex that can be found in this link. And again, additional information on the regional LLA projects. And that's upcoming, as I mentioned, next year in March. Finally, a final piece is that the Secretariat is currently in the process of developing LLA indicators The Secretariat is breaking ground here, so we are in the process of developing and enhancing LLA indicators to ensure that that these type of projects can be appropriately monitored and evaluated. Next, please. And so with that, I end my presentation.
Thank you, Lisa, for the presentation and covering the detail of LLA and the LLA funding window. Are there any questions from participants? I see there is one in the chat. I will read it. The other one I know has we have already responded to it. It was regarding who can access the LLA funding window. So the question reads, for the global aggregator, will these projects be run by MIEs or RIEs? And would they then issue calls to interested parties at a national level in countries where they choose to host these projects? And the third part is, will there be a requirement for these MIEs or RIEs to first consult with NIEs to ensure there is alignment with planned or existing LLA projects in country?
Thank you, Mike, for the question, and I will respond and maybe invite my colleague Salia in case she would like to complement. So to answer the question in short, yes to all your questions. The MIE, the global aggregator, would be run by MIEs and RIEs. The idea is to cast a wide net to ensure that a whole range of local actors can participate in these projects. They would issue the call for expressions of interest at the global scale. And in addition to that, the MIEs and RIEs would definitely have to ensure that they consult within countries that they plan to operate these projects in, ensure alignment with the country strategies and plans, national adaptation plans, sustainable development goals, and ensure complementarity with existing EDA projects, because complementarity is one of the key elements in the criteria. So to ensure that there is enhanced learning as well. But to mention that the MIEs and RIEs that will be part of the global aggregator will be running, will have to cast a wide net, and so countries at this stage will not be pre-identified, and of course it will depend on the type of expression of interest that the Secretariat would also receive from these EOIs that will be submitted. So there won't be a one model. There is no, the fund is not prescriptive, but the key goal is that the LLA principles should be operationalized through the global aggregator. And there are some additional elements that are in the criteria for the EOI that have to be met. I see there is another question on, but before I move ahead, I want to ask if Saliha would like to complement, if anything.
Yeah, and Alisa, before, so we'll look at the questions and give them to you from this end, because we also want to give the floor to other people who are raising their hands. So Salia, just on that, do you have anything you want to add? And particularly maybe there's the aspect of, is there a requirement for MIEs and RIEs to consult NIEs before they submit a proposal on LLA?
Thank you. Just to confirm, yes, they're supposed to collaborate with NIEs, and this is something that we also have, for example, as in our AFSIA guidance document. So this is, yes, a requirement. But more information, of course, will be forthcoming in the request for expressions of interest. that will then lay out these parameters around which the MIEs and RIEs can provide something of a pre-proposal, which should outline how they would, what the vision would be for implementing such a project. And then eventually they may be invited to submit a proposal, depending on board's decision that may be taking place already in October, we hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Aliyah. I see Arcadia, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead and you can take the floor. And remember to unmute yourself.
buenos días.
Arcadia, yes, we hear you. Go ahead, please.
¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan?
Sí,
Aló.
sí.
Ah, ok. Sí, muchas gracias, Lisa, por tu presentación. Una pregunta. Para los proyectos de LLA, donde las organizaciones que no están acreditadas pueden presentar proyectos, ¿esos proyectos, esas organizaciones lo presentan de manera directa o tiene que ser a través de la entidad implementadora nacional?
Yes, thank you, Arcadia, for the question. In this LLA project, so as mentioned, there is two windows, right? There is the single country LLA. So these would function very similar to the EDA, the previous EDA window. So in these type of models, the implementing entity, the NIE, would put in place on granting a small grants facility. You would design the criteria and the eligibility, and then these local actors would directly submit proposals to the NIE. So there is a possibility of submitting directly. But then again, as we've seen in the EDA window, there are different ways to and different models for the EDA window. But the key element is to enable the capacity of local actors to identify their challenges, to design them and implement and monitor them. For the global aggregator, for LLA, which will be implemented by multilateral implementing entities and regional implementing entities, again, here they will design the criteria, they will set up the facility, whatever it may be, and then local actors would submit proposals directly to the MIE and RIE. As we've seen in the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator that is currently being implemented by a few multilateral implementing entities, there are a whole range of local actors that submit proposals directly to the MIE, and their funds are received directly from the MIE. I hope this answers your question, Arcadia.
Thanks, Alisa. And maybe we'll take
Sí,
two
gracias, Alisa.
before we move on, just being cognizant of the time. But these two questions, Alisa, maybe and Salia as well, if you want to come in. The first one is, can countries in conflict access the LLA funding window? And the second question is related to regional projects. So can projects be financed at the regional level involving, for example, 5 countries? So I guess, does the LLA funding window cater to regional type projects? And while Salia and Alisa are responding to those two, I encourage participants to put other questions in the chat, and the programming team will respond to those in the chat, and we will move on to the next topic. But please go ahead, Salia and Alisa. Yeah. I don't know who will go first. Salia, do you want to go first, or would it be Alisa?
I can go first. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So the question was, sorry, can countries access regional funding? Can 5 countries access a regional project funding for a regional project. Is this, I'm not sure if this question relates to LLA or just in general. I mean, I assume it's about LLA. At the moment, I think the global aggregator, once it is this option is launched, yes, that would be a possibility. It could be. I mean, I mean, the short answer is yes, that would be possible. But that's one of many options, and it depends on what proposals are received and what is the coverage and amount requested and that sort of thing. There will be considerations about regional representation as well as cost effectiveness and all sorts of things. But yes, there's nothing preventing the implementing entities to propose interventions under this aggregator that would be regional in nature, for instance.
Thanks, Ali. And I see you had already responded to the other questions about projects in countries with conflict, and the quick answer to that was yes. There is another question in the chat in Spanish, which was asking if projects will require the letter of endorsement.
Yes.
And the quick answer to that is yes again. But
can I just clarify on that? Because
yes.
Yeah. So
after that, you can get, I suppose you're going to be talking about the PFGs. So
yes.
After that, please go ahead and get into that presentation as well. Yeah.
Sure. So then, yes, the projects always require the DA's endorsement, but we're talking about the project that is submitted to the Adaptation Fund. Once the projects, we have to ensure country drivenness, but once the funding is, for example, with the national implementing entities, and then their job is under the LLA to manage and administer the small grants, they have to ensure that it's going to be country driven. And so this should be part of the proposal, how to ensure that. It doesn't need to be necessarily from the outset, from the beginning. At some point during the project, we need to receive a confirmation that basically the government does not have a problem with the project. But the idea is really to enable locally led action, so you can try to find innovative ways to ensure that country drivenness, which is a rule, is not compromised, but at the same time that local communities can be supported easily. So I would then suggest just that we continue, my colleague Alyssa and others can help answer the remaining questions in the chat, if any. And I will go on to the discussion on project formulation grants in particular. And for that, can we please go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think if I can't see the first two lines, that probably means no one else can see them. I will try to read them. Sorry that I have to squint. So the idea of the rationale behind increasing the PFG support to the implementing entities is that increasing the size of the PFGs would better provide for the actual needs of undertaking key assessments and required consultations, and could therefore be expected to enhance the quality of proposals. And in considering an increase in PFG support, there were some considerations that were presented to the board and that the board took into the account. For example, well, it's not the biggest consideration, but now we've just discussed the LLA project. And so, for example, LLA projects may require additional funding to enable the operationalization of the LLA principles, especially devolving decision-making to the local level. So there needs to be quite a bit of work done on the ground level to prepare the ground for the project. And so the previously available levels of PFG support were not considered necessarily adequate in all cases. Another consideration is that for regional projects, the scale of funding should be commensurate to the number of countries could be commensurate for a number of countries to account for the costs related to undertaking consultations or multiple consultations as mandated by the fund's environmental social policy, for example, or gender policy. Expanding the eligibility to access PFGs so that regional implementing entities and multilateral implementing entities could also benefit, would enable more effective consultations and involvement of the local stakeholders in the design of the project. And the scope and the size of the requested PFG funding should be justified to enable the review of the PFG alongside the project concept note. Next slide, please. The slide looks very scrambled on my end. If that's also the case for you, I am very sorry. Yeah, this is, I wonder if we could just take a moment because actually, would someone confirm that it looks strange on your end? Because if it's just on mine, I can cope with it, but okay.
It looks strange, Salita.
Thank you, thank you. So here's what I'm going to do. If that is allowed, I'm going to share my screen for this, just give me a moment. Okay. And so, right. I hope you can see that better now. So now the project formulation caps per project and program, inclusive of the IE fee, which, if I can remind you, is capped at 8.5% of the grant, are going to work as follows. So for single country projects under all funding windows, and as you know, this includes a regular regular single country large innovation projects and locally led adaptation, formerly known as EDA. So if the project is below 2 million, the limit for PFG is going to be 50,000. And for these kinds of projects that are 2 million and above, but below 2 million, the limit is 5 million, sorry, from 2 up until 5, the limit is set at 100,000. For projects that are 5 million and above, the limit is at 150,000 for PFGs. Now, in case of LLA projects, there are some additional options. For single country LLA projects, PFG can be increased by another $100,000. But this will be then evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So there need to be justifications that show that this funding is required to support activities that enable devolving decision-making to local actors and to enable local actors to make informed decisions on how adaptation actions are defined, prioritized, designed, and implemented. By the way, this is text in line with the widely adopted now, LLA principles. And so if a case can be made that this funding is necessary for a single country project, LLA project that's below 2 million, the limit could be up to 150,000 in project formulation grant funding, if you can make the case for this additional 100,000, and so on. For regional projects, the rule is as follows. So for all regional projects, the idea is similar as for the single country projects. Now, if the regional project is 5 million and above with less than 3 countries, so it's 1 or 2 countries, right? The limit is 150,000. Now, for regional projects, the limit available to regional projects can increase by 15,000 for each additional country, up to a maximum of 250,000. So if you have a project that is, let's say, so most of the regional projects we receive are either $14 million, which is the maximum amount, and generally above 5 million. So for the most cases, what we will see is 150,000, but then it depends on the number of countries. The more countries, you can then increase this 150,000. So for example, if you have 5 countries, that would be an additional 45,000 on top of 150,000. And it can increase for each country up until the limit of 250,000 is reached. Now, for PFGs, for projects that are submitted using the 3-step approach. So the 3-step approach is pre-concept, concept, and fully developed proposal. This applies to regional projects, as you know, but it also will apply for new rule. LLA projects, single country projects, can also undergo a 3-step process. The 3-step process is optional, by the way, so you don't have to. It can be a 2-step, it can be a 1-step. However, if you're adopting a 3-step approach, then you can request PFG funding at the pre-concept stage already in order to help develop the concept. You may be familiar with the rules when it comes to regional projects. And the current rule is that at pre-concept stage, whatever the total maximum amount of PFG funding can be accessed by the project according to the 3 columns before this to the left. 20% of that can be requested already at the pre-concept stage and the rest at the concept stage. Or if you don't request anything at the pre-concept stage and you still submit a pre-concept, then the total can be requested at the concept stage. Just to mention that the request for a PFG should be made at the same time as the submission of the project concept or pre-concept using the revised PFG form, which is in the annex of document that Alyssa mentioned earlier, and now will be available online as well.
We have
Next
5
slide.
minutes, Thalia.
Yes, I think next slide, please.
Oh, since you are moving the slides, you can go on
Oh, yes,
to
that's
the end,
right.
and then
Thank
we'll
you
take
for
over after this presentation. That's great.
Thank you for reminding me. Wait, what is this? Yes. So very quickly, I will try to be very quick. This is a lot of information. It's useful, I think, for you to know this. What activities are eligible for PFG funding? So the document, mentioned document, has details on this. Very quickly, it includes local consultation, workshops, including translation, background papers, travel costs for experts, local participation, country, region, or site-specific risk assessments, including identifying hazards, vulnerabilities, development of scenarios, determining hazard mitigation options, consultancies and contracts to develop the program or project, gender and environmental and social risk analyses, formulation of management plans, action plans, free, prior, and informed consent, related consultations to ensure compliance with the policies, specific analyses in support of the proposed project, cost effectiveness, for example, identification of indicators, development of the monitoring and evaluation plans, costs of translation into other languages or into English, assessing capacity of executing partners, other enabling activities that support evolving decision making, for example, in the case of LLA, identification of project program level indicators. Next slide. Oh, that's still me. Sorry. Yeah. And then expenditures that are not eligible for PFG support include costs associated with normal responsibilities of an implementing entity or government staff beyond specific project preparation and formulation activities. Also not eligible are project startup costs, demonstration and pilot projects, and large-scale enabling activities. These should be done during the implementation. Also not eligible are capital goods, such as computers, hardware, and mechanical equipment, unless a case can be made that those are directly required for project preparation, and purchase of motorized vehicles, not eligible. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Salia. I think we have had some questions already in the chat, and those have been responded to. Is there any burning question? We'll take just one regarding the project formulation grants and the current setup. I do not see any hand raised, and I do not see any other additional questions.
There's one just now.
Okay. So there is one question that just came in. And the question is, can a preliminary urban plan be budgeted for in the PFG?
Yes, and I think that would be eligible, and this can be part of what's funded under the PFG. Yes.
And the very last question is, could you please repeat from when it can be applied? I think this is regarding when the PFG can be applied. Or maybe I would ask Anna to please provide more clarification in terms of what you mean when it can be applied. And please put it in the chat, and then I would encourage maybe the programming team, Sally and Alisa, to respond to that.
Yes, thank you, Farai, and thank you for that question, Anna. If you, I will try to answer it, and then if it's not the answer you were looking for, we would appreciate clarification on the question. The PFG rules since the decision taken by the board, these rules apply. So from this point on, for new submissions, we would be expecting the project formulation grant request to conform to these new rules.
Thanks, Talia. So with that, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, and this is regarding the learning grants. I see there is another question in the chat, but I gather Alisa and Salia will respond to that. That's a question from Acadia. But while they're doing that, maybe I'll ask my colleague Christina if you can take the floor, please, and talk about the learning grants and the changes related to those. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Farai. If you can go to the one you had on the screen, great. Good morning and good afternoon to all of our national implementing entities and our colleagues. I'm going to take very few minutes to talk to you about the changes that were made for the learning grants, and also talk about how these will be operationalized in the future. So the board, on the decision B42/34, they decided to approve the increase of learning grants from the current $150,000 per project to $500,000 per project in order to continue to provide support for national implementing entities in capturing and disseminating practical lessons from adaptation interventions. Now, how did this come about? This is essentially following consultation, but also clinics that were held a few years ago during the pandemic with the NIEs, where it was mentioned by national implementing entities, by all of you, that the current amount of $150 were too small for the actual amount needed to put together a proposal, and also taking into account the limited resources at the institutional level, both in terms of time and personnel. So that's how it came about to the increase, and it's been approved for $500,000. The board is also asking us to put together operational policies of how this will work, and also reflecting the increase in the learning grants. We're also going to put together indicators for learning grants, given the fact that we will decide probably to tranche the grant in two. The eligibility criteria will continue to be available for accredited national implementing entities only, and for those that have a status of accredited on our website. They continue to have to be based on an adaptation fund funded project, so they cannot be activities that are proposed, learning activities that are independent from the AF projects, but they have to be based on one of these projects. And these projects have to have reached a midpoint into implementation for those that are of a duration of 4 years, and for the other ones that are shorter, they have to have submitted at least one PPR, one project performance report, to the adaptation fund, and to have had it cleared. The other thing that was proposed and approved by the board is on a case-by-case basis to bundle the learning grants with small innovation grants. This is also something that we're going to conceptualize now and propose at the next board meeting. And again, what I want to emphasize, this is on a case-by-case basis. It is not mandatory. And the board, the Secretariat is also putting together at the moment the framework under which this will function, how the application process will work, how the monitoring and reporting will work, and of course, coupled with indicators. Next. So the eligible activities under the learning grants will continue to be the same. And I want to say this is not an exhausting list, so other activities could be added. And we've received 4 or 5 learning grants so far, so it's quite a large variety of activities. But just to mention a few, there could be lessons learned from the project. It could be studies or publications. It could be technical guidance briefs. It could be partnerships with knowledge institutions related to adaptation in the countries and nationally or regionally. It could be to set up knowledge platforms at the institutional level. It could be workshops where the learning from the projects can be distributed to other areas or to the adaptation community in general. It could be resource centers, knowledge sharing events. country exchanges, it could be learning courses, and it could also be to finance exchanges between national implementing entities, which and of those we've received quite a few. Next. So the application process will remain the same, and currently we have all the application documents online. These will probably be slightly revised given the increase and given the fact that they will be trenched in two, but they will all be available under the Knowledge and Learning tab under the Learning Grants. Of course, with all proposals, the NIEs need to attach a letter of endorsement by the designated authority and to send the application to the Adaptation Fund on a rolling basis. After this, as before, the Secretariat will review the documents and will send comments. There will be also discussions with the NIEs. And on the next slide, quickly, what I want to mention is there are available resources for these, which will probably also be slightly edited. But at the moment, they're still valid. There are 3 learning courses in 3 different languages online. And these courses sort of walk you through the process. They also give you a case study of a previous learning grant. It walks you through the application templates, and it is quite useful, we believe, in the application process. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And actually, before maybe we take questions regarding the learning grants, because I think this issue is going to keep coming up. And I know Alisa has already responded to one of that question, and the same question was asked again in Salia. You have responded to that. And this is regarding the link and the connection between reaccreditation and submitting proposals and applying for all these funding windows. So maybe just to help with that clarity, because I gather not everyone is reading the chats. Maybe I'll hand over to you, Salia, and maybe Alisa, you can come in and add, just to clarify on that aspect. So there are 3 status of accreditation under the fund. The first one is being you are accredited, you have active accreditation. The second one is you have started your reaccreditation process and you are in reaccreditation. And then the third one is you are not accredited with the Adaptation Fund. So could you then please clarify? I think the question is more to do with if you have started your reaccreditation process and you are in reaccreditation, are you eligible to submit a proposal under any of the funding windows of the Adaptation Fund for review or for approval by the board? And I guess tied to that, if you get into reaccreditation and you had already submitted your proposal when you were accredited, and the proposal is still currently under review by the Secretariat, will that proposal go on to be submitted and considered by the board when your status changes to in reaccreditation? So maybe just to clarify on that aspect so everybody is clear. So.
Thank you, Farai. I believe this question is actually better addressed to the accreditation team, because there are some quite detailed nuances there. What I can say is if the implementing entity does not have an active accreditation, so they're implementing entities that begin their reaccreditation before their current accreditation expires, and so they still are considered to have active accreditation status. They can submit proposals, and as long as they are accredited, they new funding decisions can be taken. Now, if an implementing entity loses its accreditation during the implementation of the project, it can still receive funding for that project because the funding decision was taken before the accreditation expired. And so they can complete the project. But accessing new funding is available only to implementing entities that have active accreditation. For more details than that, like I said, I think it might be useful for the accreditation team to provide a follow-up clarification on the latest rules on this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Aliyah. And maybe to add on that, as you have pointed out, we do actually have part of our accreditation team also connected. So perhaps Nasa, and sorry to put you on the spot, do you want to take this on? And if not, we can always follow up and send a circulation on this matter for clarification after the webinar. So Nasa, would you be able to respond now, or would you want to take this up after the webinar? We'll make sure that we send information on this immediately after the webinar.
Hi, Farai. I think what Saliha has provided is accurate, but yes, we can expand on this at the accreditation team as a follow-up on case-to-case basis.
Thanks, Nasa. With that, is there any question regarding the learning grants and how they are set up now, eligibility, the criteria Christina has presented? Any question regarding those or any other issue that has been presented so far? Okay, I don't see any question or any hand raised. So with that, thank you, Christina. We'd like to move on to the gap analysis for project implementation, policies revision. And we have our colleague Martina, who is going to present on that. So Martina, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Farai. And good morning, good afternoon to all the implementing entities, to my colleagues and the interpreters as well. I will also try to take a very short time. So as you know, just to provide a little bit of background, with the view of supporting adaptive management practices for the funded project and programs, the Adaptation Fund Board approved two policies, which are namely the policy for project and program implementation, which is the Annex 7 of the Operational Policy and Guidelines, which was approved in October 2017, and also the policy for project and program delays, which was first developed in 2013 and last updated in October 2019. However, since then, the portfolio has been growing and expanded also to different type of projects. For example, including Nazareth Access, innovation, and also these upcoming funding modalities under the new medium-term strategy, for example, the newly approved locally led adaptation. Next, please. Now, just to provide a little bit of more detail, what is contained currently in the policies. The policy for project and program implementation includes guidance and provisions when an implementing entity needs to make any sort of revision to the project results framework. So in case you need to do any modification to project outcome, output, or activity, this policy includes the provision and guidance and processes to be followed for approval, but also includes provision for direct project services. This is the case when an implementing entity is asked to take part of the execution services by the executing entity itself. Also, the policy provides guidelines for in cases of when the implementing entity needs to undergo a budget reallocation, and if it is more than 10%, currently is considered a material change and needs to be approved by the board. Following with the policy for project and program delays includes provision and guidance in case a project is facing extended delays in project inception, and this currently covers regular project and readiness grants as well, but doesn't really cover other projects, for example, enhanced direct access or type of project in innovation. And also provide guidance for any type of no-cost extension of the project completion date, currently setting a limit to 18 months in total. Next slide, please. But as mentioned before, since the approval and the last revision of the policies, the portfolio of the Adaptation Fund has been growing, and we have now different type of projects under implementation. Therefore, based also on an analysis that was carried out by the Secretariat, which included seeing in details the different type of project post-approval changes, then this provided a good base to mandate the Secretariat to undertake a gap analysis of the current policies. Therefore, the board decided that the Secretariat has to prepare a gap analysis on both policies that I mentioned before, so the policy for project and program implementation, but also the policies for project and program delays, and to develop options for addressing this gap identified, including as necessary also suggestions for amending the policies. And we are mandated to present the results of such gap analysis to the related technical committee, the Ethics and Finance Committee, for consideration at the 34th meeting. So this would be in October of this year. Next, please. So now the process to be followed to address this board decision, of course, the main objective, as I was mentioning before, is to undertake this gap analysis of the current policy. What does it mean? It means that we will try to identify areas which need more clarity, more guidance, but also to identify those elements or areas on which guidance is needed. So the current actually gaps of the policies. For example, right now there is no guidance if an implementing entity needs to do a change in project target sites, if there is a particular revision of the project on the project implementation arrangements. The current policies, they don't have really provision or guidance for these particular cases. And also we need to take into account different project types. As I was mentioning before, the portfolio has grown. We have different project types, for example, the enhanced direct access type of projects, which might entail a different degree of flexibility than what is covered currently in the policies. How we will do that? We are aiming to administer a survey, to send a survey to all the implementing entities to collect inputs on the above points, especially you can help us to identify which are the elements on which further guidance would be welcomed, but also these will help us to assess which are the current constraints and challenges faced by you during project implementation. The analysis that we will conduct is to see how also implementing entities are compliant with the current provisions included in these policies in terms of reporting requirements and also in terms of the related timeframes. And we will also carry out a comparative analysis of practices used by the other sister climate funds, of course, when applicable and relevant. So just to conclude, we hope to send you the survey in June, and we really hope to receive a high response rate, which will be instrumental to inform properly on the proposed options for policy revisions. And then we will proceed with also the inputs received from the survey to develop the paper for consideration by the board in October during the month of June and July. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Martina. Is there any question for Martina regarding the process that will be followed and any upcoming developments related to that? Project implementation policies. I don't see any hand raised, so we'll quickly move on to the next topic or agenda item, and I guess this is regarding the announcements from the Turk. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Vlad. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Farai, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of the participants of this webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vlad Arnaudov, and I'm a Secretariat Coordinator of the Technical Evaluation Reference Group. Very nice to meet you. So I don't have slides today, but I'll just briefly update you on some important decisions that were made at the board meeting in relation to the Turk and how they will impact the work of our implementing entities. So just for those who are not very familiar with the Technical Evaluation Reference Group, it's an independent advisory group that was established by the board in 2018 and it's been operational since 2019. And it was in charge of independent implementation of the evaluation framework, which is now replaced by the evaluation policy. So the main work of the Turk is commissioning evaluations and also oversight and advisory. We just completed our initial work program, and the board at its last meeting in April approved the new work program of the Turk for 3 years until 2027 June, as well as a revised TOR of the Technical Evaluation Reference Group. Now, under the revised TOR and also under the work program, in addition to the generation of evaluations, the Turk is also in charge of oversight of evaluation utilization and also evaluation capacity building. And I think especially the last part is very important. And we are going to work very closely with the Adaptation Fund Board Secretariat colleagues on designing and delivering capacity building activities that will support the uptake of the evaluation policy by the implementing entities. So if you have any particular requests, comments, or any feedback related to capacity building needs on your side, please let us know. And this is something that we need also to take into consideration when working on capacity building, the activity design. The other important thing that I want to mention to you, and this is related to the work program, is that there are going to be several important pieces of evaluative work that will take place over the next 3 years. This is the midterm review of the second medium-term strategy of the Adaptation Fund. So we'll commence that work from the end of the year, and we have to complete it by March 2026. And this will focus on assessing the fund strategy, funding windows, accreditation, scaling, innovation, as well as how MTS2 supports the fund's niche and strengths, the evolving climate finance landscape. And the other big evaluation, this is going to be the comprehensive evaluation, where we're going to look in depth how the fund is performing and also what is the relevance of the fund in the overall climate finance landscape. What is important for you to know is that we might approach you with surveys as well as requests for interviews as we move forward. And we'll also update everybody as this work is progressing. So please stay tuned. Don't be surprised if you receive any requests for surveys from us or any requests for interview. And just keep in mind that the work we're doing as evaluators is not the work of a police force, but this is the work to extract lessons, improve the accountability, and make this fund better and more attractive to everybody who needs climate finance among the climate crisis. So thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you very much for those announcements. And I don't know, Salia, did you have anything you want to come in and add or also announce?
Thank you so much. I've actually put it in the chat that the fund will have a delegation at the upcoming SBs, and we would like to know if you would be available, if any of you will be going there. Please do attend our side event on Monday, June 10th. The details are in the chat. And just I wanted to mention to keep an eye out for several things coming your way for there will be a newsletter sent out with the information presented today in case any implementing entities were not able to attend this morning, including the deadlines for programming and all the information about how to which email contacts to copy if you're submitting a proposal and so on. They will also, I just wanted also to mention that there will be new materials posted on the projects and programs page shortly. We mentioned some of them already. Among them, and it's already actually on the apply for funding page, there is a cost and fees calculator. This is something that we often find is a little bit challenging. So there is a calculator now that you can use when developing a project or working on the IE fees and execution costs, particularly if there are several executing entities, particularly if there's a combination between IE serving as an executing entity plus other executing entities. So to help you make these calculations more easily, we're piloting this tool. And lastly, for the MIEs and RIEs, be on the lookout for the global aggregator call for requests or call for expressions of interest that will be circulated via email to those entities. Thank you.
Thanks, Aliyah. And while we are doing the round of announcements, as we approach the end of the webinar, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Ishani. She also has a few announcements regarding the next events that will be hosted by the Adaptation Fund under the Readiness Program. And Sophie will also have one announcement after Ishani. So Ishani, over to you.
Thank you, Farai, and thank you, colleagues, for attending this very important webinar. So in the series of readiness webinar and seminar events, the next webinar will be the gender webinar, which will be a virtual webinar taking place on the 17th of June. You will be receiving a save the date in due time, as well as the agenda and the invitation link. So we look forward to all of you joining at the next important virtual webinar on gender e-learning course on the 17th of June. Following that, most of you, if not all of you, have received communication from the Secretariat that the innovation workshop that was supposed to take place in South Africa has been postponed from June to now September. It will now take place in conjunction with the annual NIE seminar, and this will take place from September 16 to 20. The Secretariat will start preparations, and more information on logistics, agenda, and every other information regarding the event will be shared with all of our entities in due time. So please keep an eye out on your emails regarding these important events coming up. Thank you, and Sophie, over to you.
Thank you, Ishani. We just want to take the opportunity of this webinar to remind NIEs to submit the report and comply with Section 7 of the legal agreement for all readiness grants. If you haven't done so, please remember to submit any monitoring or evaluation report. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we have been recording this webinar, and we will share the link to the recording on the Adaptation Fund website. We are also going to upload all the PowerPoint presentations onto the AF website, and we will send you that communication with the link to where you can access all the PowerPoint presentations. But as a last reminder, please feel free to reach out to any of the AF staff that have presented, and even those that haven't, that you have email addresses for regarding any of the topics and issues discussed today. If you have further questions, please reach out to them and we'll be very happy to respond. With that, thank you very much for participating, and thanks to all the AF colleagues and Vlad for presenting and sharing the information coming out of the 42nd meeting of the Adaptation Fund Board meeting. So, and thanks to the interpreters and to all the AF colleagues who have been working behind the scenes to make this webinar possible. So with that, thank you very much. Have a good day, good evening to you all, and good morning. And we will stay in touch via email. For our comms, please feel free to open your video so we can take a lovely group picture. But with that, thank you very much, and a gentle wave from us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I see some people have got their videos open, and I think our communications team is enjoying. They will take a lovely picture of everybody as we all sign off. So thank you very much, everyone. And it's very lovely to see all your faces. It's, for some of you, it's been quite a while. So thank you for joining, and thank you for that.
Have a good day. Good night.
Good night.
Good day, good night.
Good day, good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.